Attention members of the House of Representatives. The House will convene in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Attention members of the House of Representatives. The House will convene in 5 minutes. All persons entitled to the House floor, please retire to the gallery. Thank you.
Members are asked to be at their seats. We shall be led in prayer today by Reverend Michael Mariello, who is with the Village Church of Lincolnshire in Lake Forest, Illinois. Reverend Mariello is the guest of Representative Sente. Members and guests are asked to refrain from starting their laptops, turn off all cell phones, and rise for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, Illinois and its government shoulder enormous challenges that have no easy answers. These economic, political, and moral questions press upon the people. And so the people have sent these delegates, chosen from among them here to this chamber, to speak for them in matters of law and justice, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This body faces hard decisions which cannot be made lightly, with formidable obstacles presenting a clear path to a whole state. Lack of resources, manpower, the inheritance of poor policies, and the absence of dialogue block the way to right and true governance for a weary people. Beyond this, the heart of each representative is weighed down by the care of specific citizens in their districts. Each knows several people who are in need of advocacy in this chamber. Moreover, these delegates have parents, siblings, spouses, children, some of whom are sick or in deep crisis. To support the cares of thousands is overwhelming. To be weighed down by the cares of family is heartbreaking. Even more, this gathering takes these representatives far from home. So noble a building, indeed any place of gathered appointed power, is never meant to be home. Home is among the people these delegates serve and among family. I am grateful for their endurance. I pray for rest, time for family and worship, thriving marriages, worship, and peace. This work makes the soul weary. Refresh them. Lord, if the leaders are weary, what of the people? They are rightly frustrated. They wonder why such thoughtful leaders struggle to dialogue, to negotiate, and come to terms with one another. We, the people, look to them, chosen among the people, to cooperate and compromise for the good of the people. We are ready for this body to lead not simply Illinois, but the nation to a renewed way of doing the work of the people. The Proverbs say that the heart of the king is like water in the hand of the Lord. So I pray that in your power and sovereignty over the hearts of all people, that you would foster true dialogue and cooperation between upstate and downstate representatives, between Democrats and Republicans, and between representatives of different ethnic backgrounds. I pray they would be active, fruitful listeners. I pray they would be cooperative and look for the truth in a different perspective. Give freedom to each one's conscience to vote by reason and truth, and not by slavery to party division or the wicked power of any political machine. I pray that the freedom desired by the people and the society needed by the people would be modeled here in this chamber in the way this body conducts the business of this state. Lord, the people of Illinois are also the people of the United States. Illinois' own President Lincoln loved the Constitution, and I pray that these gathered here would know it, revere it, and uphold it, not merely in letter, but in spirit. May Illinois be forever true to this foundation of American government and touchstone of freedom. Lord, the eyes of Illinois look to this place, but may our eyes also look beyond here to you. Our nation's founders were wise to encode that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or promoting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the rights of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. I am grateful, Lord, that this session is marked by prayer. So I close, freely exercising a prayer to you in this place of liberty. Jesus taught us humility, forgiveness, reconciliation, and vulnerability. What if this place was like him? We could ask for no greater guide than he, a truly free and human person. Like him, let us all speak up for the poor and needy and do what is right and fair, not only for this body's sake and not only for the people's sake, but for your sake. Therefore, I offer this invocation in the name of your risen and exalted Son, Jesus Christ, my Lord. Amen.
Should be led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by Representative Ford. Roll call for attendance. Leader Curry.
Thank you, Speaker. Please let the record show that Representatives Drury, Golar, Gordon Booth, and Mautino are excused today.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please let the record reflect that Representative Mike Tryon is excused today, and the thoughts of this body are with him. Thank you.
With 113 members present, a quorum is established. Mr. Clerk.
Committee reports. Reservoir Flynn Curry, Chairperson Committee on Rules, request following committee action on May 4th, 2015. Referred to second reading, approved for consideration is House Bill 575, House Bill 576, House Bill 577, House Bill 578, House Bill 644, House Bill 645, House Bill 646, House Bill 678, House Bill 697, House Bill 698, House Bill 851, House Bill 852, House Bill 972, House Bill 973. Approved for consideration before the third reading is House Bill 3933. Recommends be adopted before the floor is floor amendment 4 to House Bill 3933. Floor amendment 1 to House Resolution 11.
Representative Chapalivia, for what reason do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Speaker. You look really great today.
Thank you, Representative.
Point of personal privilege, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Through the Latino Family Commission, we created in the state of Illinois the very first Latino Veterans Committee. And I'd like to acknowledge by name each of them that's up into the gallery today. We have Michael Wallace, if he could stand, with the Veterans Commission back there. We have Alba Andrasu. We have Hank Martinez. If you don't know Hank, you should know Hank, because he did a lot of great stuff for this state, for veterans, out of his own pocket. Paul Roldan, Martin Perez, Abundo Gargosa, and Alice Garcia, our Elijah, if you will. If we can give him a welcome to the Capitol, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, and welcome to your Capitol. Representative Tabares, for what reason do you seek recognition?
I rise on the point of personal privilege.
Please proceed, Representative.
Today we commemorate Cinco de Mayo, a holiday we commonly associate with great food and music. However, we also recognize the deep history attached to this holiday, where Mexican troops successfully defeated a larger, stronger, dominant French force and earned their freedom. This victory allowed Mexico and the United States to build an alliance that still holds strong today. The courageous efforts of those who fought 153 years ago echo to modern day as Latinos continue to demonstrate resilience and an unrelenting motivation to succeed. Let us continue the strong bond between the U.S. and Mexico between the celebration of Cinco de Mayo, with Illinois leading as an example. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lilly, for what reason do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
Please proceed, Representative.
Thank you. I am again standing on behalf of Kyle. We have our annual Capitol Capers scheduled for May 13th. Our first rehearsal will be May 7th after committee meetings in the Stratton on the 3rd floor. Again, we need participants, talented individuals like yourselves, to participate on May 7th, which is Thursday, after committee meetings at the Stratton on the 3rd floor. Go Capitol Capers.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Soto, for what reason do you seek recognition?
I rise on a point of personal privilege. Thank you. I also want to commend the Veterans Committee, all that are here today. I am very proud of what we're doing with the commission, which now has a committee of veterans. So again, I just want to rise and give them a round of applause, because we have many veterans living in the state of Illinois, and we just always need to recognize them. Thank you. And I will also be part of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Eunice, for what reason do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Please proceed, sir.
I would like to introduce 4 very special guests. My 4 pages for the day today, all from Pekin High School. We have Mina Vogel, who will be graduating early next fall. She is a junior from Pekin High School, and the other 3 are seniors from Pekin High School. Also with us are Alexandra Linson, Courtney Sinus, and Jenna Lowe. Can we please welcome them to the General Assembly and visiting their capital today? Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to your capital. Representative Hernandez, for what reason do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Speaker. I rise on the point of personal privilege.
Please proceed, Representative.
In lieu of the celebration of Cinco de Mayo and Unity Day, the Latino Caucus would like to invite all Assembly members to participate in our celebration at the Old Capitol, the Cinco de Mayo. It has moved to the Old Capitol. Please know that it's at the Old Capitol, 6 to 6:30. We'll see you all there.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Moffitt, for what reason do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to a point of personal privilege.
Please proceed, Representative.
2 quick points. First one being there's several celebrations tonight. I believe they involve food. And just want to remind members that if you want to be in the weight loss contest, weigh-in begins tomorrow. So after a nice night out, be a good time to start your weight loss contest at the paramedics office, 2nd floor, Wednesday and Thursday between 8 and 5. So after you've celebrated tonight, you can start tomorrow. Second item, I'm pleased to have my son-in-law was Representative Sente's guest. My daughter is here and 2 granddaughters that are going to be pages, Lillian and Grace Moriello. And in the interest of bipartisanship, I think they're going to page on the Democrat side. So we're reaching across the aisle. Thank you. And if you'd welcome my daughters, son-in-law, and granddaughters, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. And welcome to your capital. Representative Will Davis, for what reason do you seek recognition?
For an announcement.
Please proceed, sir.
If members of the chamber, for the members who are on the Elementary and Secondary Education Appropriations Committee, the work group scheduled for 3 o'clock today has been canceled. No work group for K through 12 appropriations today has been canceled. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Brady, for what reason do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
You proceed, sir.
I, too, just want to introduce to the General Assembly today my page, Emily Markle, who is from Deerfield, Illinois, and who's here with their grandfather, Roger Hunt, from my legislative district in Bloomington. Please welcome Emily to the Illinois General Assembly, folks.
Thank you, and welcome to your capital. The chair recognizes Majority Leader Representative Curry.
Thank you, Speaker and members of the House. I move that the House now resolve itself into a committee of the whole for the purpose of a subject matter hearing on workers' compensation issues in accordance with guidelines established by the Speaker.
You heard the lady's motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted and the House hereby resolves into a committee of the whole. Is there leave for the attendance roll call to be accepted for purposes of establishing a quorum in the committee? Leave is granted and a quorum is established. Representative Hoffman is appointed as the chair of the Committee of the Whole and is recognized to conduct the hearing in accordance with the schedule established by the Speaker.
Leader Durkin would like to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will you take an inquiry?
State your inquiry.
How much time will you be allotting for each one of the panels today?
As much time as needed.
For purposes of scheduling this afternoon, should we anticipate that there will be committee hearings at some point today, or are we going to abandon the committees today?
The chairman of the committee, that's not a question for me to answer. You should inquire of the Speaker's office.
Well, if you could look over your left shoulder and see the gentleman up there with the glasses, maybe I'll give you the appropriate time to confer with him so our members can schedule accordingly. So the chief clerk, and also I know he has a fine relationship with the Speaker. Maybe he can provide some guidance.
He's left. At this time, I'm informed by the Chief of Staff of the Speaker there are no plans to change the schedule at the moment. If indeed we need to put off the committees, we will do that. But at this time, there are no plans to change. It's my plan as the chairman of the committee to have a full hearing on this important issue, and we will give each individual who's going to testify and each individual who wants to ask questions, as far as representatives are concerned, enough time to do that.
Thank you. I'm looking at the schedule and I see a gentleman's name on here. Maybe let me know whether or not this is a misprint or not, but a gentleman by the name of G. Terrence Corridon will be sitting on 6 panels. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Just a few comments and thoughts. We started this General Assembly last January when we were sworn in. The Speaker made some very good comments on the floor about welcoming the Republicans back to participating in government and on a number of levels. And we gladly embrace that concept, and we've been doing that for quite some time. One of the most vexing issues we've had in this state for decades has been our workmen's compensation system, something that we've worked at, Republicans, year in and year out. Last Friday, late afternoon, I received notice of this hearing. I responded, and I said it's important that we hear also from the side of the employer. It's important that we have balance. So today I'm very much looking forward to hearing from the injured workers. I'd like to find out whether or not this system has been beneficial to them and whether or not there's been any problems in the system. That's extremely important. But I also said in my statement that we need to hear from the other side, from the employers, the job creators, the ones that are paying into the workmen's compensation system, the ones who are defending it. I'd like to see how the committee goes today and also the testimony works, but I think it's important that, and I hope that the understanding is that this is the first day, not the last day, that this General Assembly, this House of Representatives, has a committee on the whole on workmen's compensation reform. We need balance. We do have some participation from the business community, but I only see one member of the business community from the Manufacturers Association who will be on a panel of 4 people. I would like to have the opportunity after today, and I hope the Speaker is listening to this, to bring this committee back and allow for us to participate, to make recommendations for the next round of hearings, the Committee of Whole for Workmen's Compensation Reform. We were provided this list at 11:40 this morning. That's fine. I've been here before. But the fact is, it shouldn't be the end of it today. This is an important issue. This is going to be a matter that has to be solved on a bipartisan manner. Unemployment in Illinois is not acceptable. We need to do better, but we need to hear from the other side and how we can make this and craft this system, make it an efficient system, one that is fair across the board, not only for the injured workers, but also for the employers of Illinois. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope you take these comments to heart, and I am requesting that after today's hearing, that we reconvene at some point and have a second round of hearings where we have participation, where we are able to make recommendations to this committee on the whole for individuals on the business side to give their stories, to give their thoughts, and give their recommendations. That will make it a balanced approach, a bipartisan approach. So, Representative Hoffman, I appreciate your leadership today, and we welcome the testimony.
Thank you, Leader. To your earlier questions, it's my intention to allow these people who give testimony to give as long a testimony as they want. I hope they would keep it within 5 minutes. But it certainly is my intention to allow anybody who wants to ask questions, wants to inquire, wants to make statements, the members to let their thoughts be known. Just a brief statement. The current workers' compensation system exists as a way of keeping workplace injuries out of the courts. Employees give up their rights to sue an employer for an injury, even when caused by extreme negligence on the part of business. In exchange, workers are forced to rely on a comp system to protect them, provide for appropriate medical care, and to help them hold their lives together after something unimaginable happens to them. There's no one in this chamber, Republicans or Democrats, who supports fraud and abuse in the workers' compensation system. Every member on this side of the aisle is ready to enact reform that will effectively target fraud and ensure that businesses are liable only, and I repeat, only, for legitimate claims. At the same time, we should not take needed benefits away from workers who are injured through no fault of their own while trying to help a company prosper. These employees have no recourse through the courts. That's the protection we give employers. We cannot prevent hardworking men and women from being able to provide for their families just because they were injured on the job through no fault of their own. The men and women we're about to hear from, they want to work. I repeat, they want to work. Ask each and every one of them, if you might, what they would do or what they would give to go back to their old jobs and live their old lives without injury. Because of these circumstances, which are beyond their control, that'll never be possible. Now, they simply want to go on with their lives and care for their families. The people you're about to meet from Illinois and from other parts of the country, they all have similar stories. They all worked hard, they sacrificed, they played by the rules to build a secure life for them and their families. They have no desire to have to interact with the workers' compensation system, yet they've been forced to do so. They would go back to the day before their injury, and they would gladly take their old lives back without that injury. We'll be hearing from people today from Indiana, from Texas, from Oklahoma, from Illinois, who are not only victims of tragic accidents, they were also victims in those other states of short-sighted policies which were enacted by their state legislators. Their representatives may have called these actions reform. They may have talked about the business climate. They may have talked about the need to root out fraud. But what they really did is they denied hardworking middle-class families the care they need and the support they deserve. Let me give you an example and an anecdote from Indiana. Indiana only pays death benefits for 500 weeks. 13 years ago, there was a worker from Belleville, an area that I represent, who was killed on the very day his child was born. If that worker had been killed in Indiana under their workers' compensation system, that child would have been thrown off of workers' compensation benefits 20 weeks before his 10th birthday. Is that the type of state we want to be leaving a 10-year-old child? Is that the type of state we want to have and the type of system we want to have for injured workers? Everyone wants to make Illinois as competitive as possible. We support rooting out fraud and corruption. But this side of the aisle will not join other states in a race to the bottom. We should not jeopardize the safety of Illinois workers or the economic security of middle-class families and pretend that that's reform. We cannot look these injured workers in the eyes and say that their pain and struggles are insignificant. I hope no one in this chamber will be able to do so. So with that, we'll begin with our first panel. Robert Allen, who is an injured worker from Illinois, John Koffel, who is an injured individual from Oklahoma, and G. Terrence Corridon is the former chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board of Indiana. Mr. Allen, if you would proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Allen, and I'm from Cortland, Illinois. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you today. I am married, and I have one daughter. I was a union laborer for 17 years, and then became an iron worker for 4 years until I was injured. I am now employed at a warehouse. As an iron worker, I was required to be on my feet, walk, balance, squat, kneel, lift, and bend. On May 19th, 2010, I was installing a mezzanine in a factory. The ladder I was on kicked out from underneath me, and I fell 16 feet onto the concrete. I was immediately taken to a local emergency room and diagnosed with a heel fracture and back sprain. The hospital sent me to a doctor who wanted to do surgery on my ankle and heel. I wanted a second opinion and was seen by a doctor at a teaching hospital in Chicago, selected by my family and myself. There, in addition to the fracture, I was diagnosed with a multiple pulmonary embolism, deep vein thrombosis, and I was inpatient for 3 days for these conditions. I was placed on a long-term blood thinning regimen for my pulmonary issues and placed in a back brace for the broken back and spinal issues. In light of the above, it was decided to try and treat my heel and ankle injury conservatively. I ultimately tried to return to restrictive duty. I was only provided with 3 or 4 days of work, light work, over the period of a month. My heel and ankle pain was severe, even light in duty. My employer abruptly closed its doors. My foot doctor recommended fusion surgery, and I had to go to a hearing before the Workers' Compensation Commission to get that surgery approved. After placement of a filter for the pulmonary problem I had, I underwent surgery in April of 2012. It was later agreed by my doctor and the company doctor that I could not return to iron work. While I was totally disabled, I received temporary total disability checks in the amount of 2/3 of my wages. These payments were barely enough to get by, and I had to borrow money from my mother. But thanks to the Workers' Compensation Commission, my family and I were able to survive. Our lifestyles changed drastically, but we were able to pay our bills and did not lose our house. If not for the workers' compensation checks, we would have been in poverty. I now earn less than that, much less than half of what I earned as an iron worker. I received benefits as an iron worker, such as health insurance and pension contributions. I currently receive no benefits. I experience constant pain in my foot and have difficulty balancing, and I walk with a limp and my foot swells, and I also have back pain. While nothing can ever make me whole again, workers' compensation allowed me to survive. There are a lot of people like me who work hard, and then the unexpected happens, and they get injured on the job. Without workers' compensation, no one would be there to help injured workers try to survive. I urge you to take better care of workers who are injured. We are not numbers on a piece of paper or a balance sheet. We are not statistics. We are human beings trying to support our families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. After we have the testimony from the panel, we'll then go to questions, if that's okay with the members. John Koffel was injured on the job in Oklahoma. Please proceed, Mr. Koffel.
Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you today. My name is John Koffel. I'm 30 years old and I live in Lawton, Oklahoma. I have never been a resident of Illinois, but I would like to tell you how workers' compensation in my home state of Oklahoma has failed me. I hope that hearing my story, it will show you that no Illinois worker deserves to go through what I did in Oklahoma. Within weeks of my injury, my family had our utilities shut off, and my wife and I had to send our children to live with our relatives. We quickly lost our home. This all is a result of recent changes to Oklahoma state law. Had this change not taken place, I would have been eligible for up to 200 additional weeks of benefits and received up to $240 more additionally per week, which would have been much closer to the wages I was earning when I could work. I work at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Plant in Lawton, Oklahoma. I have worked there since September 3rd of 2013. One of my responsibilities as a tread booker for Goodyear is to roll up heavy rubber compound onto metal spools. And the metal spools, they can weigh anywhere from 1,200 to 2,400 pounds. They're manually loaded into what is called a tread truck. That is how my injury occurred. On July 6th of 2014, I was loading one of the tread spools into a tread truck. When I was pushing the spool into the tread truck, it got about halfway in, and I had to give it a nice good push to get it the rest of the way in so it wouldn't roll back onto me. When I did that, I had felt a burning, pinching sensation in my lower back. At that time, I had immediately told my supervisor about the injury. It happened whenever I was working overnight, so there was no doctor in the plant to see me at the time. So at 7 in the morning when my shift was over is whenever I was first able to see a doctor about my injury. Was told to come back the next day and was prohibited from lifting, bending, anything that may further injure my back. Over the course of time, my pain did get a lot worse. There was times where I couldn't stand up. Getting up from the bed to go to the restroom was agonizing pain. Whenever I did show up to my doctor's appointments, he would ask me to describe my pain, and I would told him that it was almost impossible for me to sit or stand or get from that position, and he had a smart remark as to, well, then how did you get here? Because I had to. I was finally sent to a doctor of my own, and he was able to get me off of actually working because the insurance doctor had kept me on work. They told me that they believed my injury was to be degenerative and not caused in the workplace. That was whenever I had to get my own representation to get my own doctor. In Oklahoma, workman's compensation only pays for 8 weeks for a back strain or back injury like what I had. I also felt that on the insurance side of things, they were dragging their feet. They knew they had only 8 weeks that they had to pay me, and if they took more time than just the 8 weeks, then I was just stuck with nothing, and they didn't have to pay out. At the time of my injury, I was earning anywhere between $800 and $950 a week, depending on whether or not I worked overtime. Oklahoma law currently limits my working compensation as a max cap of $561 a week. These payments are barely enough to keep my family of 5 living above the poverty line. The hardships that I endured, me, like most families in the middle class, paycheck to paycheck with a very strict budget. After my injury, I had a car repossessed, which was the first thing to go. After that, my utilities started to get shut off because I had to pick and choose which ones I was going to pay and how far I could make one go behind before it actually got cut off. With everything, with having 3 kids, my wife and myself, eventually we lost all of our utilities, and that's when we had to send our children to live with my relatives. Shortly after that, of course, I was renting a 3-bedroom house, and I couldn't afford the rent on a 3-bedroom house anymore, so that actually we got evicted from. And another thing that I had noticed is that as far as supporting our family with groceries, we had to go on food stamps. So that was Before we weren't on food stamps. After the injury, we had to take them up. I want to work, and I don't want to be in this position. I've worked my entire life and want to earn a good living for my wife and children. I do understand that there's nothing that you can do for me here, but there are people just like me here in Illinois that will pay the price if you choose to go down the same path that my state did. Please stand up for your working families here in Illinois and not against them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Koffel. The next individual to testify is G. Terrence Condon. He is the former chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board of Indiana. And to Leader Durkin's question, Chairman Condon, or Corridon, will be here in order to try and answer any technical questions you may have. He's familiar with the laws in Indiana, I believe Illinois, Oklahoma, and the other states that are testifying. So please proceed, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. The stories you just heard from John and Bob are very similar to what you hear in the state of Indiana. In Indiana, if you are injured and unable to work, then you are provided temporary total disability. Temporary total disability is 2/3 of a maximum amount determined by the legislature. In Indiana, it's 2/3 of $975, which equals, of course, $650. The determination of that at one time was made because that was taken out. That was about what the net would be when a person worked from their gross wages. They would receive about 2/3 of their gross wages. As time went on, other factors came into play that reduced the amount of money that would be paid in disability. For instance, out of the disability check, the employee, if they so wish, have to pay their insurance benefits out of that, which normally would have been taken out of the first third of the gross wages. The disability, the temporary total disability in Indiana continues until it's terminated, either because the injuries have reached what's called maximum medical improvement, and therefore they're as good as they're going to get. The person's released to return to work of some type or nature. It doesn't have to be back to the original employee. Or secondly, the individual is released to return to work with some restrictions, and if the employer provides work within those restrictions, then the employee goes back to work within those restrictions, and the temporary total disability, of course, is terminated at that time. The temporary total disability is paid for a total of 125 weeks. It does not end then, but every week after that, every $650 you may receive after that, cuts into any permanent partial impairment award which you may receive at the end of the case. So you're essentially paying yourself for the money that you'd receive as a result of any impairment that you suffer after 125 weeks. The total amount that you could be paid would be 500 weeks. With that, if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to do so.
Representative
Sandak. To the last speaker, sir, I'm looking up your resume, and obviously you've done some important work in Indiana. What is it that you do now?
I practice law in Columbus, Indiana, in a small law firm. I represent both injured employees and I represent employers. I speak on occasions. I'm a member of the National College Workers' Compensation Board, and I've talked to legislative bodies like yours in Indiana before.
And thank you for that, but and you might represent employers, but you're a petitioner's attorney, correct?
Representative, Chairman, if you could talk directly in the microphone, it would be helpful for everybody.
Thank you. The question, please.
You're a petitioner's attorney. You represent plaintiffs.
I do.
Thank you.
Is that all? Representative Markwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Allen, I have a couple of questions for you. I was listening to your testimony, and it was very interesting to me. I've been fortunate enough that I've never had to go through this. You said at first that you got your disability covered 2/3 of your salary. Is that right? So that was before workman's comp?
The workers' comp paid 2/3 of my salary.
Workman's comp paid 2/3 of your salary.
Correct.
Okay. And what sort of, I mean, even when you were receiving these benefits, what sort of changes in your life did you have? You mentioned that you had some issues with some bills and stuff like that. Can you describe that just a little bit more? I was trying to figure that out. So you're getting 2/3 of the salary that you were getting as an iron worker, right? What was that salary weekly, say, or monthly, however you want to put it?
The 2/3 was roughly $930, I believe, a week.
Okay.
Which was about 2/3. We cut back on a lot of different things, activities for the daughter, for our daughter, food and different things around the house that you have to cut back on in order to make the mortgage and the car payments.
Okay. And did you receive ultimately, as you went through the workman's compensation process, did you receive a settlement?
My case is settled, yes.
It is settled. So was there a lump sum payment?
There was a lump sum payment, yes.
And how much was that lump sum payment? Do you remember? Ballpark?
Ballpark, right around $400,000, I believe.
Okay. And what sort of things did you put that money from your settlement into? What did you?
That went to pay back my mother, other family members that we borrowed money from, and inevitably here it had to be invested towards retirement because I don't have retirement benefits coming in anymore.
Okay. And so let me ask you about that. You worked 17 years labor, 4 years as an iron worker, 21 years. There is some amount of pension benefits that you will receive upon retirement?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know how much of a pension that's going to be when you hit retirement age?
I don't know offhand, no.
Okay. And are you able to contribute to that system anymore, or you're just out of it? Because you say you work in a warehouse now, right?
I work at a warehouse now.
Okay. What's the difference in your income between where you're working now and where you're working as an iron worker?
I'm making less than half.
Less than half?
Less than half right now.
Okay. So your life has pretty dramatically changed, right? You've taken this money, as you said, you paid back a lot of people, and now you've invested it to sort of provide for a retirement. Do you have any sort of retirement benefits at the warehouse you're working at now?
Not currently, no. I choose to take more on my paycheck weekly than.
What was offered, 401k or something?
Just
like
a 401k.
Okay, very good. What would, I mean, can you tell me how your situation might have been different? I mean, you had Mr. Koffel sitting next to you talking about his. Were you listening to his testimony?
I did.
Can you tell me what you think your life would have been like had you been receiving his sort of benefits?
I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be in the house that we were in now, just because of the mortgage payments.
I have one question for Mr. Corden. Mr. Corden, you mentioned something that you get 125 weeks max on benefits in Indiana. Is that correct?
In temporary total disability, you get 125 weeks. On the 126th week on up, starts eating into, gives credit towards any PPI award that you would eventually get from your injury.
And how
so
long?
So the TTD will continue maybe for 200 weeks, but 75 of that will go towards credit for any future permanent partial impairment award.
Gotcha. And how long do those cases typically take to play out? I'm just curious, after that 125th week, how long before you know where you stand?
Typically, a case will be final within a 2 to 3 year period. And typically, you don't have temporary total disability going past 125 weeks.
All right. Thank you very much. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Zalewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Corden, way over here. Way to your right. Way to your right. There you go. What's the injury standard in Indiana as far as causation? Does the injury have to take place on the job?
It has to occur within course and scope of the employment. If that answers your question, I mean, it doesn't have to occur within the building itself. It can occur in the parking lot. It can occur if you're a traveling salesman while you're traveling somewhere. But it has to occur within the course of your employment in order to be compensable.
Is Indiana having a rise out of employment standard? In other words,
It has to, in the course of employment and arise out of the employment, yes.
so it's similar to that of Illinois, or exactly like Illinois?
I'm not familiar with Illinois like you would be. It arises, the words are, does it arise out of and in the course of employment are the words of the act in Indiana.
And Mr. Koffel, to the extent you can answer this, do you know what the standard was in Oklahoma when you were injured? Did you have to have been injured while you were on your job?
I do not know.
Okay. Thank you both for your questions.
Representative Cave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Corden, did I understand you to say that you had worked, I'm over here, sir, right here, right here. Did I understand that you had worked in an administration within Indiana government?
I think you understood that correctly. The structure in Indiana for workers' compensation is there are 7 judges throughout the state, one of whom is the chairperson. And I was one of the 7 for 32 years. I was chairman of the 7 for 12 of those 32 years. Okay.
Are you familiar with how rates are made in Indiana?
Well, I think with NCCI's determination, the type of work that's being done, the exposure.
Mr. Corden,
don't turn my head.
Yeah, just for everybody's edification, could you describe what NCCI is and may? I know Mr. K knows what it is, and I know what it is, but not the rest of the members may not. And then you can answer Mr. K's question.
I forgot what it stands for. Actually, it is the national body that determines the cost of your premiums for workers' compensation. It makes a determination of the type of work that's being done. That is that type of work more apt to cause injury than the type of work that I do sitting behind a desk? The type of work that maybe John did, it has a greater exposure, and therefore they determine premiums based upon that.
Well, what I was hoping was that maybe you could explain to the members how the rate-making process takes place, with the exception of states that are monopolistic.
I'm probably not the right person to ask that.
So you don't know?
My familiarity with it is not what I'd like to go on record as having said with great deal of certainty.
One last question, sir. Do you know if most of your companies in Indiana are in a debit or credit rate mode with respect to their experience modification factor?
Couldn't answer that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cave, later on, Terry Robinson from National Council on Compensation Insurance, or NCCI, will be here. I assume she'll be able to answer that question. Representative Flowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Allen, you were injured on the job.
That's correct.
May I ask, as a result of your injury, has your job improved itself so another worker won't be injured as well?
I don't know that.
Okay. Mr. Caulfield, were you injured on your job?
Yes, I was.
Do you know if your job has improved so another worker will not suffer the same consequences that you have?
As far as I know, the process it's all the same. So,
it's all the same?
Yeah, it's all the same as far as when you're loading those spools into the tread truck. There's no possibility that they can change how they're loaded.
There's no way they could change how it's loaded?
That is correct.
So what could have helped you to prevent your injury?
My particular injury happened during a startup, which means that we were coming back from our 4th of July break. The trucks were double parked side by side. They're normally not like that, but because it was a startup, there was extra equipment that wasn't being used at the time. And with them being double parked, it gave me less room to get momentum to roll that spool up into that truck. And because of that, because of my injury, they have said that when they're double parked, not to load them, but to have that extra row removed. So for my particular injury, that's the action that they took to make sure it didn't happen again.
So at least they did take an action.
Yes.
To make sure it wouldn't happen again.
Yes.
And approximately how much was your payout?
On my compensation claim?
Yes.
There's nothing yet.
Okay. Whatever it is, it'll be a cost savings because hopefully it won't happen again to someone else.
Right.
Thank you.
Representative Kelly Burke.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. John, if I could ask you a couple of questions. First of all, thanks for coming all the way from Oklahoma to testify. I think you just answered the previous representative that your case is still pending?
Yes.
So during the time that it's been pending, am I correct? Did you say you've only received 8 weeks of temporary disability?
In the beginning, that's where it was 8 weeks until either the insurance companies, doctor, workman's comp, said that I was hurt at work or not hurt at work. So if I wouldn't have gotten my own representation to get me my own doctor, then at that 8-week mark, when it did stop, I would have had to waited for the workman's comp doctor to get around to saying, yes, I need surgery, or no, you can go back to work. And in that meantime, after the 8 weeks, I wouldn't have received pay. But I was lucky enough that I did get a doctor on, I think, 9.5 weeks after the injury. So there was only a week and a half where I was actually without any pay.
And then how long will that temporary pay continue? Do you know?
I'm already off of it.
So what was the maximum?
That was how many weeks max?
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure how long I was on it. I would say 5 months until I had my surgery, and then after my recovery, my surgeon, he actually released me, and when he released me is whenever the TTD stopped.
Okay, so you've been released to go back to work?
Yes, but I'm not back at work.
So what are you doing?
I am waiting for them to get me into a position that I can work.
So you can't do your previous job because of your injury, so you need to find a restricted position?
Technically, yes, but no at the same time. The only reason why I can't return back to my previous job is because I was out of that job for longer than 6 months. So it's just kind of their company guidelines on it.
Okay.
But
so you can't reclaim your job?
Right,
Okay.
but I did have to do an FCE test. They rated what I can lift, how much I can lift, how frequent, and everything like that. And those results are what is stopping me from getting a job back in the plant currently.
Okay, and I think you talked earlier about your family having to get some assistance in the form of food stamps.
Yeah.
How long did you have to do that, or is that continuing?
Currently still on them.
Okay. And did Oklahoma's workers' compensation system take into account the size of your family, the fact that you were supporting a wife and 3 children?
No.
So it's the same amount no matter your family size, as far as you know?
Yes, the $561 a week is the actual maximum for anybody in the state of Oklahoma. And it can be less than that.
Can you describe the difference between seeing your personal doctor and seeing the doctor your employer's insurance company chose for you?
Yes, this was my examination from the workman's comp doctor. Upon arrival, I went into an office with one of his nurses. She asked me a bunch of questions about previous employment, car accidents, anything like that. When I actually was examined by the insurance doctor, he had me try to bend forward, try to bend backwards, side to side, go take an x-ray, and that was it. that was all the examination that the insurance company's doctor gave me.
And how many times did you see that doctor? Just the one time?
Just the one time. The experience that I had with my own doctor is, of course, he did a physical examination, checked reflexes, seeing if I was weak or not. I had an MRI, which that's whenever we noticed that I had a bulging disc pinching my nerves. And he completely explained to me the extent of my injury and what I should and should not be doing as far as movement and what may make it worse until I actually do have surgery. So my own doctor that I was able to get took good care of me whenever the insurance doctor was just trying to push me through.
And has your own doctor recommended surgery?
Yes, I've already completed it.
Oh, you completed it, okay. Do you feel that the legislators in Oklahoma were taking your best interest and the best interest of other workers into account when they changed the workers' compensation benefits?
No, I believe they were taking the employer's best interest, not the workers.
You clearly want to take care of your family and have worked hard to take care of your family. But how does it feel to not be able to support them?
It's undescribable, really. I mean, pretty much, if I was to give a crazy example, if you were to see your husband or child drowning in a pool, but not being able to get them out of it, kind of the same feeling.
Were you able to reunite with your kids?
Currently, no, because of the situation. My wife and I, we have separated, and our kids are living with her father at the moment.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming, and thanks for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Representative Conroy.
Robert, what year was, I'm over here, sorry. What year was your injury?
It was 2010.
2010, and what year was your settlement?
Was 2014.
And was there more than one company involved in what happened to you?
No, just one.
Just one company. And are you permanently disabled then? Not able to go back to work at all?
Not able to go back to ironwork, no.
Okay. My husband had a scaffolding injury as well, and he broke his heel in 4 pieces in 2009. He was in a cast for 5 months. He tried to go back to work. As it turned out, he had to have a bone graft and have his foot rebuilt, which took a total of about 3 years. We lost over $100,000. His settlement was $37,000. The arbitrator actually said that in no way does this come close to compensating him and gave him an additional $10,000. We lost our insurance. He is back at work with a permanent disability. He limps very hard and will eventually need to have his hip replaced. And because he took the settlement in order for us to keep our house, the workman's comp will no longer pay for anything having to do with that injury going forward. So I don't understand your case real well. I'd like to know a little more about it, because I know ever since the law was changed in Illinois, we were told by our attorney that unless there's a second company involved, there is every portion of your body has a dollar amount. So for us, we were lucky to get $47,000. So in your case, you definitely came out financially a little bit better, although obviously it's a total loss. So I would be interested to see exactly how that worked. But what I would say to this body is that that's not typical. That is not typical of workman's comp. That is not typical of workers to receive that much money in a settlement. Again, our attorney told us, and this was in 2012, that they had never seen an arbitrator actually give more money than what the settlement was supposed to be. And like I said, for 3 years and a major rebuilding of his limb, his foot, he was awarded $47,000.
Representative Kipfowitz.
Thank you, Chairman. For both the panels, Robert and John, I appreciate you being here. One of the things I hear from individuals struggling with workman's comp, and John touched about it, is dealing with the insurance company. Robert, can you tell us some of any struggles or in particular, if you had to go to court for any of your payments, or how working with the workman's comp insurance company, and then followed by John on how the workman's comp insurance companies work in Oklahoma. If you can give me a little bit of insight onto working with that entity.
I sought some legal representation in order to get the surgery. Once in a while, the insurance company would slow down the check payments. I don't know why. Sometimes it was claimed for computer programs or something like that. They changed insurance adjusters a couple of times. That the insurance company has somebody that talks to my legal representation, and when they would change, sometimes the payments would slow down. Eventually they did make good with all the money, but I don't know how more to elaborate for you.
So these slowdowns, then obviously you didn't get payments for several months, or I mean,
the longest I believe was 9 weeks.
So you had 9 weeks without a check or any money.
Correct.
And that would affect maybe a house payment, your car payments, those
Correct.
credit issues. Okay, thank you. And then, John, can you attest to working, I know you mentioned about the doctors, but just in general, the payments and how it works in Oklahoma. Are the payments on time as needed, or
No,
you mentioned
they're not.
briefly about this 8-week issue. Can you please elaborate a little bit?
I got my first check, the very first one. After that, it was 3 weeks before I got my second. And that also goes into play as far as timing and with my utilities and paying my rent. And it was 3 weeks right after the injury that I didn't have anything, nothing to give to anybody. After that, it was kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it would be a good 7 days apart, which was normal, and then other times it would be 10 days apart. I often wondered why, and whenever I called them, they said, oh, well, it's in the mail, so maybe it's just not gotten to you yet. But whenever I did get legal representation, they came one time like clockwork after that.
So you had to get a lawyer involved in order to get the payments that were due to you in a timely manner?
I did not need a lawyer to actually receive my TTD, but shortly after getting one is whenever they came on time.
So it could be indirectly related?
It could be, but I have no proof of it.
Right. Thank you very much.
Representative Kay for the last question of this panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the members of the panel, thank you for coming today. I'm just curious as to whether any of you are aware that we're not talking about reducing rates to Indiana or Oklahoma levels. Does anyone know that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, Mr. Koffel. We appreciate your testimony. We appreciate you coming here, particularly Mr. Koffel coming all the way from Oklahoma. We'll move on to the next panel. Mr. Corrigan will remain, Chairman Corrigan will remain, and Keith Price, who was injured on the job in Illinois, is next. Mr. Price, thank you for being with us. If you could pull the microphones close to your chin, and please proceed.
Thank everyone for letting me speak today. My name is Keith Price. I was born in Chicago. I was working at a company called Unikema on the south side of Chicago when I got injured. I was working there for several years and I got injured. I'm missing my right leg below the knee. I got hurt, I got thrown from a forklift at work. Something was messed up with the forklift. And I was thrown from it. I hit the back of my head, severed my tongue, as well as broke my jaw. My jaw was wired for 9 months. During this period, I received workman's comp, and everything was fairly good. Then it was cut off from long-term disability to, it was just cut off. They were trying to decide how they were gonna go to short-term. So I didn't receive any payments for maybe 2.5 months. I almost lost my home. I live alone. I almost lost my home. And I was eating canned soups. I was real stretched. And this was not only a physical matter, it was also a mental matter, I must say. And I survived, went on, had to go back and forth to doctors, to rehabilitation, as well as speaking with my doctors, trying to get healthy. Then years down the line, I did get involved with a support group at RIC, Rehabilitation Institute in Chicago. But with my accident, I was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital. From there, I went into a coma. I came out of the coma within 4 days, and I asked to be taken out of the hospital. I was taken to Loyola University. I was gonna go to Northwestern, but they didn't have a bed for me. They had a doctor, but no bed. So I was able to go to Loyola University. That was very helpful. I had my amputation at Loyola University, as well as had my jaw wired. From there, I went some years, I became what they call a volunteer. I started seeing patients in my condition. Years down the line, I came down with cancer. Actually, I had stomach pains, and I had a doctor look into go down, take pictures of my stomach, and on his way out, he found cancer in my throat. So I had to have radiation for that. From there, the ball just rolled downhill. From there, I was diagnosed with MS. So that's how I'm living today. I needed every benefit there was and more to survive, just to live. My day-to-day was hard. I haven't even been able the past year to see patients like I normally do at Loyola University, as well as the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, because I'm down now. I have to bring myself up best I can. I'm faced with a disease that there's no cure for. And here I am today. I don't really know what else to say. As far as work, I no longer work. I've been just doing therapy. I get therapy every time I come into a situation as far as the cancer and MS. I go through rehabilitation again and try to get myself healthy. As far as work, I don't work a job anymore. My job, they no longer have me there. I'm no longer at work.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Corridan.
Thank you. Mr. Price's history of his injury and the subsequent medical treatment is dissimilar to what is in Indiana. Indiana does not have an employee choice of physician. It is an employer authorized physician, and you are directed to go to that doctor that is authorized by the employer / workers' comp insurance company. They do not, there's a distinction that is made. The insurance company does not direct the medical treatment. It authorizes the doctor to perform the reasonable and necessary medical treatment for the patient, but is not supposed to direct the doctor as to what treatment should be performed. That's one difference in his case than what would be in Indiana. The second one is in the prosthetic devices and the replacement of the same. In Indiana, the employer is responsible for the first prosthetic device. Thereafter, and all subsequent changes that must be made to the prosthetic device is paid for by what we have termed a second injury fund. It's a misnomer, but it's a fund that is set up in part to pay for the subsequent prosthetic devices that the injured employee needs. It is overseen solely by the Workers' Compensation Board of the state of Indiana, and primarily the prosthetic devices are approved or disapproved, as the case may be, by the chairman of the board. And those are the dissimilars between Keith's case and what would have occurred in Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Price, thank you for being here today. I know it's tough. Oh, over here, I'm sorry. Thank you for your testimony today. I know it's tough and takes a lot of courage to come before this body and present your story. And, you know, in addition to your workplace injury, it sounds like you've been through a lot. So, again, thank you for being here and speaking with us on this subject matter. I know when you opened your statement, you said that you worked at your workplace for several years. Specifically, did you have a number of how many years you were at your workplace where you were injured?
7 years. I started in 1998 to 2005. February 2005 is when I was injured.
Oh, so you said 7, not several. 7 years.
I might have said several, but
okay.
7.
Okay, great, thank you. And I didn't hear the nature of the business, but did you qualify for a pension?
Yes, but I don't know anything about a pension as of now. I was in a manufacturing company.
Okay. And you did receive a settlement for your injury?
Yes.
And if you're comfortable talking about it, what kind of things did you put your money into or invest your settlement into? It's
mostly invested.
Mostly invested?
Mostly invested, yes.
Okay.
Probably 90 to 95% invested.
Okay. And I know it's tough, but is a settlement worth losing any part of your body for the rest of your life?
No, I had a good job. I had a really, really good job. And if I had it to do all over again, I'd rather walk, play basketball, play with my nephews. That's it.
Well, there was, you mentioned that there was a lot of travel involved, doctor visits, things of that nature. Could you tell us what your life has been like since losing your leg?
I was doing the volunteer work. I would go sit and talk with patients like myself. Some before they lost a limb, some after they lost a limb, and answer questions, not give advice. I don't give advice to them. But I was trained at Johns Hopkins University up in Baltimore to be able to do this by some doctors and physical therapists. It's called NACA, Amputation Coalition of America. And that's what I did. I volunteered, I did things with my family, went to events with my family as far as my nephew. That's pretty much all.
And some people are arguing that the Illinois workers' compensation system needs to be cut back on its benefits that it provides. Can you tell us what your situation would have been like had Illinois, the workers' compensation system here in Illinois provided you less than what you were afforded?
I'm for sure I would have lost my home. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you right now.
Well, again, thank you for your testimony, and I appreciate you being here answering questions.
Thank you.
Representative Kivowitz.
Thank you, Chairman. My questions are mostly focused on Chairman Corden. My father was an amputee. He lost his leg right before the knee, and he suffered greatly with multiple prosthetics as he went along. Can you expound on this fact that if one prosthetic can fit well for the first year and a half, but as things change, he had to get multiple. Can you expound on this second injury and what qualifications a chairman of a workman's comp committee would have over a denial of a new prosthetic if it's needed in a case such as Mr. Price?
I will say I've had, again, several to 8 maybe prosthetics in the past 10 years. Weight loss and weight gain causes me to have to get another one. And I can't always control my weight. Of course, I've tried to. My eating habits have changed tremendously. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Price. So Mr. Price has had 8 prosthetics. Can you talk about Indiana system of this review process?
Indiana would have paid out of this fund, and again, it's a misnomer. It's called second injury fund. You don't need a second injury to have the next prosthetic paid for out of the fund. It's just the employer has the obligation for the first prosthetic and any subsequent prosthetics that the injured employee would need because of growth or change in body structure, for whatever reasons, as determined by his treating physician, his or her treating physician, then the injured employee would bring that script, so to speak, from the doctor to the board and present that to the board requesting a prosthetic device, what the doctor would recommend.
And what qualifications are members of this board to be able to evaluate whether or not a prosthetic is necessary?
I think they
for
rely
replacement?
They rely almost solely on that which the doctor is recommending.
And then secondly, in Indiana, we heard from Mr. Price talking about how he had to have speech rehabilitation due to the injury to his tongue and jaw. You testified earlier that first of all, they don't have an employee choice of physician, so they would have been given what is reasonable and necessary treatment. And I realize you're just speaking from your experience, but reasonable and necessary, do you believe that would have covered all the speech rehabilitation that Mr. Price had to have due to his injuries, or do you think that reasonable and necessary treatment is a bit of a gray area when it comes to things such as being able to properly speak?
I think it really falls into very much of a gray area.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Price. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Representative Conroy.
Mr. Price, I just have, over here, right in front of you, just about. So my question for you is, in your struggle and when you were injured, between the time you were injured and the time you received a settlement, did you lose your health insurance and did you have to pay for it out of pocket?
No.
So you continued your health insurance, your company continued to pay for everything while you were injured until your settlement?
Yes.
They did. And after the settlement, do they continue to cover all your insurance, or do you have to pay for that yourself?
Right now, things are being paid through workman's comp, but no, the company setup was called annuity.
So was that set up through your settlement?
Yes.
Okay, because oftentimes what happens is when workers are injured and they're recovering, a lot of times they lose their health insurance and they have to pay a COBRA. So they actually end up injured and they're recovering and they actually lose their insurance and have to pay for it, which is something that happens many times within workman's comp. So, so were you in a union?
Yes.
You were, okay. Which really is, a lot of times that's why you get to do COBRA. They allow you to do COBRA for a while until you completely lose it. Thank you so much for your story. We really appreciate your story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Willis. Representative Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions for Mr. Corrigan. It says here on our agenda for the today that you were the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board of Indiana. Is that correct?
Correct.
How long were you in that position?
I was chairman for approximately 12 years.
12 years?
Yes.
And when did you leave?
I left in 2006.
2006, okay. How was that position chosen?
The position is chosen by the governor.
Okay. I mean, did you retire? Or what was the reason you left in 06?
The 7 appointments are gubernatorial appointments, and under Governor Daniels, I did not get reappointed when my term ended.
Okay. And then what did you do before that?
I was a little boy.
Well, now,
I don't
all of us don't tell the truth
facetiously.
about our age, but I think you're older than 22 here.
I was in an unfortunate position when I got out of law school in 71. I got out of law school and I was appointed a governor's appointment to the board in 74. In Indiana, you're also allowed to practice law at the same time. It's not a full-time job. So I continued to practice law, obviously not in workers' compensation, in other areas in Columbus, Indiana, during the time that I was a judge on the Workers' Compensation Board.
Okay. And what do you do now?
I practice law where I had in Columbus, Indiana, with my son and 2 other people. We have a very, I spend most of my time, quite frankly, probably 60% of my time in mediating workers' compensation cases.
Okay. You know, I don't think anybody in this chamber, anybody in this building wants to truly take away benefits from people that were injured on the job and have varying difference of injuries, varying different family situations. But on the flip side, employers look at this graph we have and it's price of their work comp premiums per $100 of salary. And I know a lot has made comparison, this is Illinois, this is Indiana. But there's a lot of other states that are even 20 cents or 30 cents or 50 cents cheaper. And I don't think that people have focused on taking benefits away from people, but it's the fraud and abuse. In Indiana, is drugs and alcohol a determining factor as to whether or not someone could qualify for workers' comp.
Are you asking me if a person becomes an alcoholic? Or
No. If they were drinking on Sunday, they got hurt on Monday morning, or even during the week, can drugs or alcohol affect whether or not a person can collect workers' comp in Indiana?
It's a statutory defense to a workers' compensation claim that if you are intoxicated in the broad sense of the word, either by alcohol or by drugs, and that is a causative factor of the accident, then that is a complete defense to any workers' compensation claim.
So they might not get the benefits.
They wouldn't get the benefits if that was the causative factor of the accident.
Now, what if they got hurt on, they went out Monday night and playing basketball and they got hurt, made it into work the next day, and claimed it as a work comp injury?
The burden in Indiana, they did change the law to make it the burden in every element of the case on the employer to show that the accidental injury arose out of and in the course of that employment. So you would have to have a doctor indicating that this particular injury did come out of some accident at work.
And I think for the most part, everybody feels that way. But yet in Illinois, we're a no-fault state, and those factors do not determine whether or not you can collect workers' comp. So I want to make sure we stay focused on what are the real reforms that most people want, and that's causation. These three gentlemen that have testified so far, and I'm sure the other ones, everyone will find that, they got hurt on the job. They're honest buying employees, they should be compensated. They should be taken care of. Their injuries going forward should be taken care of. But that's not what not the entirety of what everyone's arguing about. It's some of these other things that Illinois goes above and beyond in what qualifies a person to collect for workers' comp. Thank you.
I would just point out, it's my understanding from legal counsel that our standard is that it must arise out of or in the course of business as well, just like Indiana. So, Representative Kay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm curious, Mr. Corrigan, did you come here today thinking that we in Illinois were cutting benefits?
That conversation never arose during any course of discussion that I had with anybody.
Well, you've made some comparative analysis, and I'm listening to you, and you talk very much like you believe that as we sit here today, we're cutting benefits. Do you believe that?
Sir, I have no idea what the legislative body is even thinking about. I literally was asked to, when I heard their stories, to say what in Indiana would occur if this accident happened in Indiana, and that's all I was asked to do. I'm not advocating any position, sir. I mean, I think the prosthetic devices that we have out of the Second Injury Fund is a great way of helping people like Mr. Price, which I don't think that cuts anything from what you're doing.
Well,
in fact, it probably helps the insurance company.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it helps the insurance company, but in discussion, I think it helps to know that we're not proposing any benefit reductions, and maybe going forward today, that would be useful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Monique Davis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Price, I want to thank you for coming and strongly, giving your testimony. Here I am. Thank you so much. But I want to ask Mr. Corrigan, you may not have had any of these cases, but I wonder if in Indiana they've had any asbestos cases.
I am currently representing an employer in an asbestos case, and that is probably the first asbestos case I've seen in 30 years. So it's a rare case that you run into it.
I think in Illinois we've had a number of them, and it took a very long time for the researchers to realize that asbestos was causing cancer to employees. And I just thank you also, sir, for your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. We appreciate you coming, and may God bless you. The next panel is Stephen Emery. He was injured on the job in Illinois, and Laurie Summers, who was injured on the job in Indiana. And I would just say to the members of the body, Mr. Corridan is here to provide technical advice. He has indicated and was asked not to take position on any bills that are before the General Assembly. He's just here to say what would happen in Indiana under similar circumstances. So we understand what he does for a living, we understand what he did for a living, but I don't think we can question the veracity of his knowledge regarding Indiana law. Mr. Emery, if you would proceed.
My name's Steve Emery. I'm from Carterville, Illinois. I worked as a coal miner for 30 years. I hurt my hands hammering and beating on big rocks that would get hung in the feeders and in the scalpel screen, and had to have surgery on my hands, and now I'm not even able to pick up 5 pounds. Unable to work. I thank God for this, for our workman's compensation that we got in Illinois. Without it, I couldn't have made ends meet. I did have some hardships. The company cut my compensation off due to what their doctor had said compared to my doctor at the time. And I went 2 years without any income. I had to receive help, borrow money to make ends meet. And I had a real hardship, made a hardship on my family, my 3 children that I was raising. But at the end, I still thank Illinois for their workman's comp.
Ms. Summers.
My name is Laurie Summers. I live in Illinois, actually Crete, Illinois. For many years, I worked right across the border as a float floor nurse in Dyer, Indiana and Hammond, Indiana. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today because as I hear, there's been some comparison between Illinois and other states regarding workers' compensation. I think it's very important that you hear my story and understand why I would never recommend anyone to work in the state of Indiana. I went to work that morning and it was just a regular morning, and I had a patient that weighed over 400 pounds. I then went and got 3 of my fellow employees to help me turn this man so I could take the linens out from underneath him. The patient let go of the support bar on the hospital bed. And when you're taking linens out, you kind of have to prop someone up like this and tuck. He was over the top of my head because of his body girth, and when he let go of the support bar, because of where I was positioned, all the weight came back down on me. Immediately I had pain, my neck hurt, and I couldn't move my arm. After my injury, I did and followed all of my hospital's policies. I reported my injury immediately, followed the treatment based on the recommendations of the workman's comp physician that the wellness center required I follow for treatment. The workman's compensation doctor recommended that I go for physical therapy for my neck. Nothing was getting better. The physical therapist felt the problem was in my shoulder, not my neck. So they then sent me to another workman's comp physician, and he gave me an injection in my shoulder, and for about 48 hours, my shoulder felt better. But I was told again, it's your neck, not your shoulder. I was put through a barrage of very invasive tests trying to find out if I had an injury in my neck, and of course I didn't. everything came back negative. I went every 2 weeks to the workman's comp doctor and asked him repeatedly, please just fix me. I want to go back to work. After all the therapy and testing were done, this doctor told me to return to work, and I could return to work on a restricted duty. However, my hospital had a policy in place that for the first 3 months before you could go on workman's compensation, you had to do light duty. That was it. You received no more restricted or light duty after that. When I explained to him, they're not going to let me come back to work, out of his mouth, he said to me, well, I guess it looks like you don't have a job then, do you? I left that office and called over to the wellness center and told them I'm getting a second opinion. I got a call back about an hour later from their supervisor telling me, you can get a second opinion, but we're not paying for it. So I did go get a second opinion, and I paid for it out of pocket. And I went to a doctor that I worked with all those years on the floor that I trusted. I ended up being there about 3 hours that day. And when the doctor walked in to see me, he asked me, have you ever seen the MRI of your shoulder? No, I had not. All I had seen was the written report, which stated that my shoulder was showing inflammation and arthritic changes. He said, come over here. He goes, I'm a spine guy, Lori, and I can see the damage in your shoulder. Actually, the MRI had arrows pointing to the damage. He then told me that he wanted me to go see another one of the physicians that did shoulders to have him look at it and see exactly what I needed. Again, I had to tell him, you know what, they're not going to let me do that. He's not on their workman's comp list, so I can't see this doctor. By that point, the doctor that I had worked with for many years was so mad, he sent an email to the CEO of our hospital. And ultimately, I got to see that physician that he recommended. I went 10 months with a dislocated shoulder and a torn rotator cuff. The policy in my hospital was that after that first initial 3 months of receiving light duty, that if you couldn't return to work in 1 year, they didn't have to hold your job for you. There was no way that I was going to be back in that time because I had to have surgery, and the physician told me it'll be 6 months of therapy, minimally, before you can return to work. I was pretty concerned about this because I had worked at that hospital for a long time. I loved working at that hospital. And I went to HR, and I voiced my concerns, and they told me, don't worry about it, Lori. 8 days before that year was up, I received a letter in the mail stating that if I could not come to work, back to work, in that 8-day period of time, they would no longer hold my job for me. I have listened to that young man talk about financial problems. Thank God I didn't have kids at home. My salary was so significantly less. I had to pay for my medical benefits out of my own pocket. And until today, I've not really talked about this much, but I had to pull money out of my retirement fund so I didn't lose my home. I worked very diligently and very hard for that money, and I'm telling you right now, I have no idea now when I'm going to be able to retire. I started applying for jobs as I had talked to my therapist who was with me through the whole thing, and I said, when I start getting a little bit closer, please let me know. I sent out applications 6 weeks before I was figuring I was going to be released, and I had to very carefully pick and choose the types of jobs that I wanted to do. I went back to work. I am currently working as a home care nurse, and I totally enjoy it, but I'm still trying to make up for everything that I lost because of that injury. Now, I want everybody to understand something because I've been hearing a lot of things. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was treated like I was scamming them. By the time I got that surgery, my injury, ball of my shoulder was sitting here. I walked around like that for 10 months. My rotator cuff was fixed, and I had to have my shoulder reattached. What does that mean for me? I can't go back to the floor. The orthopedic surgeon that did the surgery on my shoulder on the last day that I saw him after 19 months of this going on said to me, you know, Lori, I'm really sorry. If they would have just taken care of this right away, you would have been back to work in 4 to 6 months, meaning I could have gone back to the floor, back to my old job. That is no longer an option for me. I cannot do the lifting that is required weight-wise in a hospital. I can't lift over 10 pounds. I also have not retained full range of motion of my shoulder. I've listened to everyone's comments and everyone's questions, and I'm really appalled when I hear people using Indiana as an example of what Illinois should be. That's not a good example. It's not a good example at all. Clearly, if we're saying this, we're not thinking about the actual workers. In closing, I believed with all my heart that my hospital would take care of me. What I did not know, however, is that working in Indiana takes away that simple security. The working men and women in this state, if they lose that security by changing workmen's compensation laws to possibly mimic that of the state of Indiana, will be a sad day for all concerned. I thank you very much for letting me come here today and speak to you.
Thank you, Ms. Summers, for attending. Chairman Carradine.
Thank you very much. I think the differences that you just heard underscore the difference between Indiana and Illinois as it has to do with the choice of physician, who selects that physician, whether the employer does or the employee. And as stated by Lori and stated by me earlier, Indiana does select or the employer is selects the physician for the injured employee. And in Lori's case, that acted as a disadvantage. That doesn't mean it happens that way in every case, but in her particular case, it seemed to be a disadvantage as far as she could tell. Also, the differences in their cases is that Lori now is no longer able, from what she says, to go back to her similar type of employment, and from what she had said, she has a loss of income as a result of that. And as I understand, in Illinois, there's a wage differential that is paid to injured employees who end up with a permanent restriction of their body so that they have a loss of wages in the future. There's something called a wage differential paid to injured employees. In Indiana, I believe Lori was assessed a permanent partial impairment rating by her treating physician, and based upon that schedule that they have in Indiana, she was paid a certain, whatever that sum was, a certain sum of money for a permanent partial impairment award, and that's the differential between Indiana and Illinois.
Thank you. Representative Bradley.
Mr. Emery?
Yes, sir. Straight ahead, Mr. Emery.
Southern Illinoisans in the back row.
He talks like you.
Thank you for being here today. My great-grandfather was crippled in a coal mine, and top fell on him, and he was never able to work again. And my great-grandmother, my grandma, my mom, her sister, they struggled as a result of that. Were you underground or were you above ground? Or?
I was above ground when I hurt my hands, but I worked 20 years underground, 10 years on top.
You worked 20 years underground in a coal mine?
Yes, sir.
And you were above ground. Now, when you said you ran a hammer, why don't you explain to these good folks here what you mean by a hammer and what that really means?
I used a sledgehammer, raise it up over your shoulders and come down to bust big rocks that would get hung in a feeder. And the feeders were the dozer pushed it off into a feeder, down to a feeder that fed onto a belt that took it to the plant. It also had to go across a thing called a scaffold screen, and this screen had holes in it that would shake up and down and let the rock and the coal at a certain size fall to the belt. If this big rock come through there and got hung, it had to be beat and broke, sometimes use a jackhammer on it, and it had to be broke up, in other words, to go on out to what they call the scrap pile.
And that was your job?
And that was my job.
And you did that?
I worked 6 and 7 days a week, every week.
And you worked 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours?
I worked 12 and 16 hours a day.
Right, because you worked when you were needed, didn't you?
I worked I had a mandatory of 12-hour shift. Sometimes I worked 16. If somebody didn't come in that day, I would work 4 hours over. Somebody else would come in 4 hours early.
I just think it's important for people that don't understand, you know, coal mining and that type of work, just how dangerous and just how strenuous that is.
Pretty dangerous.
And, sir, how does your injury continue to affect your life?
Well, I've had to take disability. I'm unable to work anymore. I can't lift more than 5 pounds. I can't even get a gallon of milk from the store. I have to take it in a half a gallon. It's affected my life totally. I've took a lot less of pay. A person that was used to making 90 to 100,000 a year to go to making just I bring home about $1,800 a month.
That's not a luxurious life that you're living.
And I've had to, no, and it was hardship on it broke my family apart. I had to leave home. I mean, my wife, we lived together, but it became a hardship. And we were together for 15 years, and when I raised her kids, and it was a real hardship with all of us.
What does it feel like, and I say this because I don't know, but what does it feel like to work your whole life and then not be able to do that anymore?
Well, I miss it every day. I enjoyed my work.
What does it feel like to not be able to provide for your family, to have that much of a reduction?
It's terrible. It's very terrible.
And I assume you had to at some point borrow money or get help?
I had to borrow money to make ends meet from family members, and also the bank was good to me, and I had worked for the owner of the bank that owned the mine at one time. He was Farmers Bank, and he was very good to me. He loaned me money, and that's the only way I could make ends meet at the time.
And did you have to borrow money from relatives and friends?
Yes, I did.
And what did it feel like to have to go to borrow money?
It was embarrassing. It's terrible.
Would you say, well, let me ask you this. Did you go to a company doctor?
Yes, he sent me to a company doctor.
And did that company doctor relate your injury to the strenuous work in the coal mine or something else?
He related to my injury as pushing a lawnmower and playing baseball as a young kid.
So you work over 20 years in a coal mine.
I worked 30.
Strenuous work. And then after all that, somebody told you that your injury was from playing baseball as a kid.
Baseball and pushing a lawnmower.
How'd that feel?
I was angry, if you want to really know.
What do you say to people that say you're overcompensated?
That I'm what now?
Exactly. What do you say to people